In the dressing room, Shinkawa's coach scolded him for his actions during the fight. He reminded Shinkawa that he wasn't just facing disqualification, he might be kicked out of the entire organization. The coach asked if something had happened in Shinkawa's life. Shinkawa apologized and the coach, easing up slightly, acknowledged his dedication. Despite 10 straight losses and countless injuries, Shinkawa had shown up at the gym every single day, but a week before the fight, he had suddenly vanished. The coach asked what had happened during that missing week. Shinkawa recalled vivid memories, visions of ancient Colosseum battles where warriors tore each other apart. As the memories consumed him, sweat began to pour down his face. The coach noticed his growing anxiety and the tremble in his hands. Kneeling beside him, he examined Shinkawa more closely. His face had turned pale, his pupils were blown wide, and his body shook violently. Acting quickly, the coach took a cup from the ice bucket and held it to Shinkawa's mouth, trying to regulate his breathing and calm the panic. Just then, the door opened. The coach turned to see the president of the FFC entering. They greeted one another, and the coach immediately began apologizing, assuring the president they intended to apologize to the opponent right away. The president waved off the apology, stating that such matters should be settled between fighters. However, he made it clear that the incident couldn't simply be overlooked. This was a martial arts organization, not a volunteer charity, and allowing a fighter who couldn't control his emotions posed too great a risk. Despite the criticism, the president admitted that the match itself had been incredibly impressive. Because of that, he was willing to offer them a chance. In 1 week, FFC 7 was set to take place. One of the underdog fighters had suddenly backed out, possibly due to nerves, and the president was looking for a replacement. He asked if Shinkawa would step into the ring. The coach immediately realized what that meant. If the other fighter backed out, the opponent must be incredibly strong. The president then revealed the name. Oji Taizai, known as the lightweight prince, ranked 3rd in the FFC's lightweight division. The coach was stunned. Not only was Taizai a top-tier fighter, but Shinkawa was a welterweight. Dropping enough weight in just 1 week would be nearly impossible. Still, the president presented them with 2 options: refuse and all future contracts with the FFC would be off the table, or accept, and if Shinkawa put up a good fight, he would be guaranteed a professional debut. The president then turned to Shinkawa. Before the coach could negotiate on his behalf, Shinkawa agreed without hesitation. Both the coach and the president were surprised by his decisiveness. Shinkawa reaffirmed his choice once more. The coach warned him that what he did today had taken real guts, and the president told him this was his moment, his chance to make it count. Thanking them for their time, the president reminded them that the match was in 1 week. As the door closed, the coach turned to Shinkawa, explaining that he would need to drop 10 kilograms in just 7 days. By then, he'd be little more than a walking corpse. The coach cautioned him that while this might seem like an exciting opportunity, the truth was that the organization was simply using him to keep the match from falling apart. The odds of winning were practically non-existent. He asked if Shinkawa still planned to go through with it. Shinkawa answered without hesitation, yes, he would do it. The coach saw the determination in his eyes and noticed something else. His hands had stopped shaking. Reluctantly, the coach agreed, but made Shinkawa promise one thing: if anything like today ever happened again, he would be banned from the gym for life. He reminded him of the values they upheld at the gym. They were a team brought together to fight, but what happened in the ring today wasn't a fight, it was a street brawl. Shinkawa had ignored the rules, disrespected the match, the referee, and his opponent. There hadn't been a shred of respect in his actions. Shinkawa promised it wouldn't happen again. The coach smiled, asked how he was feeling, and suggested they go apologize to the other team. Finally, he congratulated Shinkawa on his first knockout. Meanwhile, somewhere else, a phone rang. The name flashing on the screen was the FFC president. A man answered, informing the president that Taizai was a bit tied up at the moment. Taizai, hearing this, asked who was on the line. When told it was the chairman and about the upcoming match, he slammed his drink down violently, startling the girl beside him. With a glare, he angrily demanded to know who his challenger was this time. A formidable army amassed near an ancient medieval castle. Through the visor of a helmet, the protagonist watched as the enemy charged. Steeling himself, he prepared for battle and rushed forward, only to suddenly jolt awake. In the present, Shinkawa sat in a medical room as a doctor asked if he was feeling all right. Regaining his composure, he resumed the conversation. The doctor reviewed his symptoms, confirming they were recurring hallucinations that began after a specific dream. Shinkawa agreed. He prescribed anxiolytics and sleeping pills, cautioning that while the medication could be habit-forming, it wasn't addictive. If one pill wasn't effective, an extra dose could be taken. She advised that the medication could be consumed on an empty stomach, but warned never to mix it with alcohol. Handing him a 1-week supply, she instructed him to return after finishing the course. Shinkawa headed to the front desk for his prescription, silently hoping it was all just a dream. At the very least, he felt relieved that no one was treating him like a lunatic. From her office, the doctor observed him and began recording notes. According to the file, Shinkawa was a 20-year-old amateur mixed martial arts fighter. He claimed to experience out-of-body episodes during sleep, vividly reliving 5 years as a slave forced to fight in ancient Greece. The dreams were so intense that he could no longer distinguish reality from illusion. Symptoms of insomnia and panic attacks had emerged, prompting the prescription of sleeping pills and anti-anxiety medication. He had also reported frequent déjà vu and intense flashbacks of ancient battles, which had begun to interfere with his daily life. Shinkawa stared at his reflection in the mirror. Every time those memories resurfaced, he reacted violently to even minor stimuli, overwhelmed by uncontrollable rage. Hyperarousal symptoms were becoming more evident. Removing his shirt, he revealed fresh bruises across his torso. The doctor, analyzing the accumulated evidence, concluded that Shinkawa was exhibiting classic symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. She recalled that he had described being trapped in relentless, nightmarish battles for 5 years. She noted that this condition often developed when someone was repeatedly exposed to traumatic environments. But still, she wondered, could a single night of nightmares really change someone so completely? At that moment, Shinkawa was watching footage of Oji Teise's fights. Oji was brutal and aggressive, finishing his most recent match in just 7 seconds. His record stood at 13 matches and 9 wins. At the gym, the coach commented that Oji was, after all, a national wrestling gold medalist. Oji's stats were imposing. He stood 7 centimeters taller than most in his division and weighed in at 80 kilograms. After weigh-ins, he typically recovered to 100 kilograms. The coach noted that although Shinkawa matched Oji in height, the weight difference was a major disadvantage. Unlike Oji, who cut weight strategically, Shinkawa had just 1 week to lose 10 kilograms. The plan was brutal: stop eating and shed the weight that way. It would be painful and his condition would deteriorate rapidly. Since it wasn't a proper weight cut, there would be little time to recover between weigh-ins and the fight. Shinkawa would enter the ring as a walking corpse, fighting to return to peak condition under 5-minute 3-round rules. This would also be his first fight using 5-minute rounds, unlike the 3-minute rounds he was used to in amateur matches. The coach gave him one final opportunity to back out, admitting he hadn't yet contacted the chairman. This was the last moment to walk away. Shinkawa, resolute, said he would do it. After seeing the determination in his eyes, the coach gave in and told him not to even consider losing. The only goal was victory, and the strategy was simple: finish it in the first round with a knockout. Shinkawa expressed concern that Oji would have prepared a countermeasure, especially since his previous win had come from a counterstrike. The coach agreed, stating that Oji's team would likely try to drag out the match and avoid a knockout. To prepare, the coach told Shinkawa to start sparring for a warm-up. Once the warm-up ended, he was to put on a glove and begin visualizing Oji as his opponent. Imagine being in a terrible physical state from rapid weight cutting and conserve energy. The coach emphasized that Oji would be aware of this and would likely avoid direct confrontation. Shinkawa asked about the strategy. The coach replied firmly, continue pushing forward. When Oji refused to engage, bait him into throwing the first punch, then land a devastating counter. The coach raised his glove and told Shinkawa to imagine he was Oji. The moment he moved, Shinkawa was to strike with all his might. Shinkawa did exactly that. He delivered a powerful punch straight into the coach's glove, startling him with the sheer force. Without pause, he followed with another strike, even more powerful than the first. The coach was surprised to see that Shinkawa hadn't lost any punching strength despite the weight loss. Shinkawa struck again, this time with such impact that the coach's training glove was flung from his hand. The coach smirked, now starting to believe that Shinkawa just might be able to win. With renewed energy, he shouted for Shinkawa to come at him again. Shinkawa didn't hold back. His next punch blasted forward with enough power to send the coach stumbling, the glove flying across the gym. At the gym, one of the fighters approached the coach with concern. He couldn't stay quiet any longer. Shinkawa shouldn't be doing this, he insisted. The weight cut was killing him. He reminded the coach of that tragic case in 1FC, a fighter who died during a similar cut, dropping 10 kilograms in just 1 week. It was reckless. He begged the coach to stop Shinkawa before it was too late. The coach responded calmly, reminding him of Shinkawa's strict control over his diet and salt intake. Under these specific circumstances, it wasn't impossible. It all came down to whether Shinkawa could endure it. But the fighter pushed back. Even if Shinkawa did succeed in cutting weight, his opponent was Oji Teise, ranked 3rd in the lightweight division. He didn't stand a chance, not in this condition. Most fighters who go through something like this end up quitting the sport entirely, traumatized by the experience. And even if he kept going, it wasn't like fighters made real money. All it did was worry their families. The coach cut in, acknowledging that point. To most, this path was just self-satisfaction. It didn't put food on the table. Maybe it was better to quit while he still could. The fighter hesitated, then turned to Shinkawa directly. He told him no one would blame him if he withdrew. If he just asked the coach right now, it would be over. He pleaded with him to reconsider. but Shinkawa ended the debate. He said he was fine. The coach nodded in agreement and shifted focus. He turned to the concerned fighter and told him to get ready for sparring after his warm-up. It was going to be a brutal fight, no doubt, but they were all in this together now. Then the coach turned back to Shinkawa and outlined his diet for the week. 1 banana, then train. 1 avocado, then train again. That was it, minimal fuel for maximum exertion. On sleepless nights, he could nibble on raw broccoli or bell peppers. The coach warned him by the end he would barely be able to speak from calorie deficiency. Was he ready? Shinkawa nodded with unwavering resolve. The concerned fighter tried to speak again, but the coach cut him off. He reminded him that he'd been through this kind of camp before. Then he addressed the sparring match. He told the fighter to take it seriously. The man scoffed, refusing the headgear, clearly annoyed. In his mind, he thought the coach was trying to push Shinkawa until he gave up, but he didn't object further. They touched fists. Shinkawa immediately slipped into a fierce fighting stance, eyes burning with intensity. In his mind, the gym vanished, replaced by a roaring coliseum, ancient and blood-soaked. The fighter threw a heavy punch, but Shinkawa evaded with barely a motion. A second strike came. Shinkawa dodged again, leaning just out of range. Then he adjusted his footing and surged forward. With a clean, explosive punch, Shinkawa struck. The blow sent the fighter's mouthpiece flying as he crumpled to the floor. Silence swept the gym. One of the gym members recognized the downed man. He was ranked 5th in the FFC welterweight division. Shinkawa's expression darkened. A surge of violent instinct threatened to overtake him. He felt the urge to finish the downed fighter to kill. The coach rushed to check the fallen man's condition. Thankfully, he was all right. Turning to Shinkawa, the coach reminded him this was exactly why he'd told him to wear headgear. The fighter made excuses, saying he just let his guard down and asked for a rematch, but the coach wasn't having it. He asked if those same excuses would fly in a real match. He warned that while the guy might feel fine, his body might tell a different story. The intensity of Shinkawa's aura bore down on the fighter like a storm. He stood there, silent, glaring. The coach asked if he was all right. Shinkawa looked down at his fist, slowly relaxed it, then extended his hand to the fighter in sportsmanship. He thanked him for the match. The fighter admitted his defeat. He now understood Shinkawa's strength. He hadn't even had time to react. The coach, now more confident in Shinkawa's resolve, gave him the next instruction. Takeshi, the fighter he just defeated, would be teaching Shinkawa wrestling, his biggest weakness. While Takeshi rested, the other gym members would take turns sparring Shinkawa in a relay-style session. Each fighter would go 1 round, one after the other. The coach called out the first opponent. The man hesitated, cautiously securing his headgear. The coach looked back at Shinkawa and gave one final directive. Backing up equals losing. He told him to inch forward, apply pressure, conserve energy while slowly draining his opponent's stamina. That was the strategy. Later that night, in a cozy restaurant, waiters bustled between tables, serving plates of sizzling food. Customers chatted and laughed as they enjoyed their meals. Suddenly, a figure dashed past the window, a hooded person wearing all black. One of the girls seated by the glass caught a glimpse of the runner. She murmured under her breath, barely audible. "It is that person." Back in the gym, Shinkawa was deep in sparring, his eyes locked onto his opponent with unwavering focus. Around him, the atmosphere buzzed with intensity. 2 fighters, Takeshi and another gym member, were off to the side, caught in a heated argument. Though their voices were hushed, their frustration was clear. Takeshi insisted he wasn't the only one who got messed up sparring with Shinkawa. The other fighter shot back, reminding him he was completely knocked out cold. Meanwhile, Takeshi turned his eyes toward the ring. He was watching the sparring match unfold, already looking forward to stepping in next. Behind them, the coach observed quietly, arms crossed. The weight cut was becoming a serious issue. With the limited time left, it was going to be rough. On the first day, Shinkawa's punches were so powerful that the coach's hands had swelled even through the mitts. But now, on the 3rd day, there was a clear drop in his striking force. His body was breaking down along with the weight. The coach muttered under his breath, wondering whether Shinkawa would even be able to land a single meaningful hit by fight night. With only 1 day left to recover, it was becoming a dangerous gamble. Elsewhere in the desolate, sun-scorched land of memory, an army of ancient soldiers trained under a clouded sky. Shields were raised in unison, the sound of armor clanking in rhythm. Among them stood Shinkawa, gripping his own shield tightly. A commanding voice echoed through the ranks, "Ready your spears." He braced himself, heart racing. Then suddenly he awoke. Lying in bed, he looked nothing like the fighter from that battlefield. Shinkawa was now skinny, pale, and miserable. He moved with a sluggish stiffness, took a pill from his nightstand, peeled a banana, and forced it down. Then, without a word, he threw on his hoodie and left for another training session. At the sauna, other gym members were preparing to step in for a steam session. When Shinkawa pulled off his hoodie, silence fell. The bruises on his torso were dark and severe. One of the men assumed he must have pulled a muscle, possibly even torn it. Given its location, they speculated it could be the latissimus dorsi, a muscle directly linked to punching power. Shinkawa stepped onto the scale. The digital numbers blinked: 75 kilograms. The guys encouraged him, telling him he could easily sweat out the last half kilo. The realization hit them: he had lost 10 full kilograms in just 1 week. Impressed and slightly worried, they all entered the sauna together. Inside, the heat enveloped them. Shinkawa sat in silence, enduring it with gritted teeth. In his mind, the battlefield returned. Circling overhead, vultures screamed across the red skis. One of them locked eyes with him and Dove. Without hesitation, he raised a spear and impaled the bird midair. Back in the present, soaked in sweat, Shinkawa stepped onto the scale again: 72 kilograms. "Just a few more grams," someone said. Everyone tensed up for the final stretch. They held out 5 more minutes. At the official weigh-in, Shinkawa stepped onto the stage. His face was gaunt, his frame depleted, but the digital screen lit up. 70 kilograms. He made weight. Cleared and passed. The team erupted in celebration, congratulating him on pulling off the impossible. Then came Ojiteze. The moment he walked in, the contrast was staggering. Oji looked massive, like a completely different weight class. Even at a glance, it was obvious he hadn't even tried to cut weight. As the two fighters passed each other, the size difference was almost comical. Shinkawa looked like a shadow of himself, while Oji smirked with a quiet arrogance. The weigh-in announcer hesitated, then read out the number. 77.4 kilograms. The crowd gasped. The president's face twisted in fury. He cursed under his breath. Oji was disqualified on the spot. Gasps rippled through the audience, murmurs filled the air. The match was now in jeopardy. The president stormed toward Oji, clearly fuming, demanding to know what the hell he was thinking. Oji's coach stepped in, explaining that due to severe muscle cramps and non-stop vomiting, the doctor had ordered Oji to stop all activity. The president wasn't buying it. He reminded them that Oji normally weighed 80 kg and was only 7 kg over, which meant, what? He barely even tried to cut weight, and this was supposed to be the main event. Oji, calm but clearly not happy, explained that the fight had only been confirmed a few days ago. He didn't have time to fully prepare. He apologized, but that just made the president even more irritated. An apology, that wasn't going to cut it. Then Oji dropped a legal bomb. Since he hadn't received his fight money, technically he wasn't obligated to fight. Oh, and by the way, his contract with the FFC just ended. Mic drop. The president shot back, questioning why none of this was mentioned earlier. He accused Oji of just trying to protect his image, maybe even hinting that Oji had already signed with someone else. That accusation hit hard. Oji thought it was unfair and honestly kind of dirty. But then the president shifted gears. He dangled a tempting deal: 3 million yen total, split between a base payment and a win bonus. That definitely caught Oji's attention. Of course, there was a twist. If Oji lost, he'd walk away with nothing. And if the fight went to decision, there'd be a deduction for failing the weight cut. Oh, and the president couldn't help but throw in a little taunt. Classic. At this point, Oji couldn't refuse. The conditions were harsh, but the money and maybe his pride forced his hand. He agreed. Midway through the chaos, Shinkawa was asked what he was supposed to do now. But before he got a proper answer, Oji's coach stepped in, saying there was no point fighting someone who failed to make weight. He even questioned Oji's professionalism, calling his stunt straight up embarrassing. That lit a fuse. Oji lost it and snapped back at the coach. The tension. Thick, and if you're ready to feel that same electric intensity every time the action escalates, go ahead and hit that subscribe button to stay right in the heart of it all. The president cut through the noise. He told Oji they'd find a more suitable opponent for Shinkawa's, someone in the right weight class. Shinkawa's would still get the 100,000 yen as promised. Not bad, but then came plan B. If Shinkawa's was still down to fight in the main event, the president sweetened the pot. He'd toss in Oji's 1.5 million win bonus. That meant Shinkawa's could walk away with 1.6 million yen if he won. The other fighters, pretty sure they all did a double take. Shinkawa's was in no hesitation, his coach not thrilled. He warned there were only 24 hours until the fight and Shinkawa's wasn't in top shape, but Shinkawa's wasn't backing down. He said he'd recover in time and he meant it. Oji of course had to get the last word. He taunted Shinkawa's, saying he should use this chance to make a name for himself, though all that prize money would probably end up going to hospital bills. Not cool. Shinkawa's fired back, calling Oji trash for not even being able to make weight. That one hit a nerve. Oji was about to go off again, but the president stepped in just in time and told them to save it for the cameras. Then came weigh-in time. Shinkawa stepped on the scale 70 kg, nailed it. Oji followed 77 4 kg, disqualified, not even close. The reporters were stunned. One of them asked the question on everyone's mind, how did he miss weight that badly? A 7 kg gap basically screamed, I didn't cut anything. A female reporter chimed in, guessing that the rumors about Oji getting a contract offer from ONE FC were probably true. She continued, pointing out how wild it was to accept a new contract mid-cut and just bail. She figured he probably didn't bother cutting to save energy, since the fight money now meant nothing. Then the president took the mic. He announced that although Oji failed to make weight, Shinkawa's had agreed to move forward with the fight. But he added none of it mattered if Oji had no motivation to compete. He glanced at Oji and laid out the deal. No pay if he lost, double pay if he won. High risk, high reward. The female reporter commented that the president was clearly desperate, throwing everything at the wall to keep the show alive. She even wondered if Shinkawa's would make it out alive. Another reporter joked that with a 7 kg difference, this might be less of a fight and more of a beatdown. Both fighters stood on stage, locked eyes while the cameras clicked, tension maxed out. Oji smirked and tossed a taunt at Shinkawa's. The president handed Shinkawa's the mic, giving him a chance to respond. With a sharp glare and zero hesitation, Shinkawa said he'd finish it in the first round. Bold, the crowd loved it. Not to be outdone, Oji grabbed the mic and fired back with the same threats. Round 1, game over. As they walked off stage, the president turned to his assistant and quietly ordered her to investigate Oji. He wanted her to spin the situation in a way that would hurt Oji's image and send the footage to ONE FC, make them really think twice about that contract. She asked if having Shinkawa's as the opponent was a good move. Wouldn't it look worse if the fight ended instantly? The president shrugged. Combat sports weren't about guaranteed outcomes, they were about the possibility that anything could happen. And was he hoping Shinkawa's would win? Not exactly. As long as the kid put up a decent fight, that was enough. Late at night, a car rolled through the quiet streets, carrying Shinkawa and his team. Inside, the mood was tense as they discussed a change in strategy. The coach explained that Oji had been penalized for failing to make weight. If the match went to a decision, then Shinkawa's victory would be secured. The coach instructed Shinkawa to rely on feints and frontal attacks, just enough to score with jabs and low kicks. He warned against starting an aggressive offense and advised Shinkawa to throw punches only when he could time counters. If that wasn't possible, he was told to evade using footwork. Shinkawa pointed out that this approach was the opposite of their usual strategy. The coach acknowledged it, explaining that their previous plan had been more of a gamble. This, however, was a real strategy. Still, Shinkawa expressed doubt, nodding that no one wanted to see a fight like that. But the coach reminded him that he was already at a disadvantage. Stalling for time wasn't an option. The focus now had to be on holding his ground. The coach continued, telling him that if he didn't want to prove the doubters right, those who expected him to lose, he had to commit fully. Shinkawa, determined, stated that he intended to finish the fight in the first round. He had made a promise and he planned to keep it. The coach then offered a final piece of advice. In the world of fighting, effort meant nothing. There was only winning or losing, no in between. With fierce resolve, Shinkawa declared that he would win. The fire in his eyes said it all. Everyone in the car smirked, a quiet but clear sign of pride. The coach said no more, offering just a nod of encouragement. Shinkawa continued eating, focused on recovering everything he had lost. 30 hours later, the arena lights blazed. It was time for the main event. The announcer's voice echoed through the crowd as he called out Shinkawa's name. Stepping into the octagon, Shinkawa was met with cheers. This time, there were fans in his corner. Among the crowd were the two reporters who had covered the weigh-in. One of them noted that Shinkawa had recovered quite a bit in just a day. The female reporter, watching intently, couldn't help but think that it would be painful to see someone so handsome take a beating. Then came the opponent, ranked third in the lightweight division, Oji Tesa. The crowd erupted as Oji entered the arena, hand raised high. His pride annoyed the organization's president, who sat nearby. A woman next to the president took a video, possibly to send to 1FC. Oji entered the octagon, striking a pose for the crowd before turning to taunt Shinkawa, suggesting he'd be eating hospital food by the end of the night. The referee gave the signal. The fighters touched gloves, the bell rang, and both dropped into their stances. Oji was quick to act. He raised his leg and landed a powerful strike on Shinkawa's. As Oji stared at him, expecting a reaction, Shinkawa didn't move. This unsettled Oji. Was Shinkawa really planning to take the kicks head-on? If so, Oji was more than willing to oblige. He delivered another kick. From the sidelines, the coach shouted for Shinkawa to initiate sequence number 6. But still, Shinkawa didn't move. Oji threatened again, claiming Shinkawa would be crawling home, and continued hammering his leg with kicks. Blood began to drip from the impact points. In Shinkawa's mind, he wasn't just a fighter, he was an ancient warrior, shield raised, weathering a storm of arrows. He waited, patient, knowing that once the barrage ended, it would be his turn to strike. Another kick landed, and this time, Shinkawa lost his balance. Oji saw his chance and launched another attack. The gym members and coach watched with concern, but Shinkawa remained laser-focused, like a lion waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. Before falling, he grounded his leg in just the right position, regaining his balance and using it to dodge Oji's incoming strike. Oji attacked again, but Shinkawa slipped past it once more. Then came the counter. Shinkawa planted his leg firmly and threw a powerful punch straight into Oji's face. The crowd froze, even the reporters were stunned, but Oji hadn't gone down yet, he was still conscious. In desperation, Oji threw another punch. Shinkawa ducked, dodged, and wound up his final strike. With every ounce of energy he had left, he launched a crushing uppercut straight to Oji's chin. Oji's body went limp as he collapsed into Shinkawa. To seal the victory, Shinkawa landed one last uppercut, ensuring the job was finished. The president, the reporters, and everyone else watching stood in silence, their faces frozen in disbelief. The referee stepped in and stopped the match. Outside the octagon, the crowd was left dumbfounded. Shinkawa had just defeated the third-ranked fighter Oji. Caught in the heat of the moment, Shinkawa was overwhelmed by a strange sensation. In his mind, he heard a chant, something ancient, primal, a cry to finish off his opponent. In his hallucination, it felt like the entire building was urging him to end Oji. But the illusion shattered when his coach called out to him. His teammates rushed into the cage, embracing him with joy and pride. The coach praised him, saying everything had gone exactly according to plan. As Shinkawa glanced at the audience, he noticed how frozen everyone appeared. No one had expected this outcome. The match result had stunned them into silence. Meanwhile, the commentators began analyzing the fight. They remarked on how Shinkawa had lost his balance after repeated strikes to the leg, making it seem as if he was defenseless. In reality, he had deceived everyone. His calm composure had masked his true intent. The rookie had just knocked out the third-ranked fighter, and no one had seen it coming. The president looked over to where Oji was receiving treatment from his team. There was a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. Shinkawa had made good on his promise, delivering a first-round knockout. The result had exceeded all expectations. Eventually, Oji regained consciousness. The president, watching silently, smirked to himself. This outcome had gone even better than he'd imagined. The announcer approached Shinkawa and asked for his thoughts. Shinkawa responded with unexpected indifference, stating that the fight had been disappointing. The commentator followed up, asking about the 10 kilograms he had lost in just 1 week and what challenges he had faced, especially considering Oji hadn't even made weight. With unwavering confidence, Shinkawa replied that there was nothing challenging about beating Oji. Then he took the microphone and made a bold declaration. He wanted to fight the champion. If the champion wasn't too scared to face him, he should step up now. The entire crowd gasped, the atmosphere shifted. In the VIP section, the president made a dramatic pose, one reminiscent of Lelouch from Code Geass. He had thought Oji was the villain in this story, but now it seemed another had taken that role. Shinkawa left the octagon with the spotlight following him. The crowd's attention was still locked on him. On social media, the comment sections exploded. Everyone was talking about Shinkawa, the match, and the shocking outcome. People were blown away. Elsewhere, inside a locker room, a man watched the fight replay on his phone. Another entered the room, sensing that a new wind was about to blow through the world of fighting. However, he also pointed out that such a wind could die down in an instant. He then addressed the man watching the video, who turned out to be the reigning champion. He admitted that after seeing Shinkawa defeat the third-ranked fighter in his debut, some might get the wrong idea. Still, he gave credit where it was due. Shinkawa had impressive punching sense, strong expressions, and a level of composure that didn't match his rookie status. It felt as though he had survived countless real battles. If Oji had prepared more seriously, the champion noted, the fight could have been far more interesting. Oji hadn't been motivated from the beginning and never got to show his full potential. A shame, really. The other man informed the champion that the organizers wanted to schedule a match between him and Shinkawa while the hype was still hot. The champion didn't hesitate. He put on a gas mask, accepted the proposal, and approached a massive tire for training. As he began his workout, he simply stated that the fever would die out once Shinkawa lost his next fight. A week later, inside a university hospital, Shinkawa sat across from a doctor. She asked about his dreams. He explained that these dreams weren't ordinary. They were lucid, yes, but different. Normally, he wouldn't feel pain in dreams, yet in these, the pain was vivid. Bones breaking, swords cutting, arrows piercing, he felt it all. It wasn't reality, but it wasn't just a nightmare either. No matter how much he struggled, he couldn't wake up. Not after a week, not after a month. There had been a moment, just one, when he believed he'd finally returned to the real world. He remembered the joy, thinking it was all over. But that too had been a dream. He had only fallen asleep again, exhausted from fighting within the dream. 5 long years passed in that dream world before he finally returned. Even now, he admitted there was fear that it might all happen again, that he might be pulled back. He couldn't tell if this life was real or just another illusion. He wasn't even sure if he was truly alive. But there was one thing he knew for certain. To find the answer, he had to keep fighting. At the Corner Man MMA training center, the coach stepped inside expecting a quiet morning, but what he found was a surprise. Shinkawa was already there, cleaning the gym. Shinkawa greeted him casually, but the coach was having none of it. He reminded Shinkawa that rest is also part of training, especially when preparing for the next match. Apparently, Shinkawa hadn't heard the news. Curious, he asked about the next fight. The coach gave a wry smile. The organizers had already contacted him about a title match with the champion. Then, in a not-so-subtle jab, the coach added that some bastard went and issued a challenge on his own, clearly referring to Shinkawa. The coach then shifted into a serious tone. He warned Shinkawa that Harayama, the reigning champion, had never lost a fight. Unlike Oji, Harayama wasn't a wild beast. He was a cool-headed robot, a master tactician who specialized in mental warfare. Harayama's technique was extensive. He could adapt to nearly any situation, proficient in jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, shoot wrestling, and boxing. And what made things even more troublesome were his physical stats. Though only 1 centimeter shorter than Shinkawa, considered small for the lightweight division, Harayama had an absurd reach of 190 centimeters. Even worse, he was a southpaw. A left-handed striker with freakish reach was a nightmare for any opponent. His muscle-to-bone ratio was high. His low center of gravity made him stable, durable, and hard to knock down. Not that Shinkawa would be taking him to the ground anyway. To summarize, he was a southpaw, so his attacks would be hard to read. He was short, so he'd be harder to land clean punches on, and with that long reach, his strikes could come from unexpected angles. If Shinkawa couldn't close the distance and started eating shots from afar, then panicked and rushed in recklessly, that would be the end of the match. Shinkawa calmly asked if the coach was trying to scare him. The coach responded that he wasn't trying to scare him, just making sure he understood everything before accepting the fight. Without even blinking, Shinkawa accepted the match. They bumped fists, sealing the decision. Then, the coach informed him that an interview was scheduled for the afternoon and told him to just answer freely. Later that day, the familiar female reporter from the last match entered the gym. She commented on the good atmosphere and the coach greeted her, saying everyone had been full of energy since their rookie fighter's explosive debut. From across the gym, they saw Shinkawa training, doing pull-ups with a heavy weight tied to his waist. Takashi raised an eyebrow. He's still doing that. Shinkawa responded without looking back. If he imagined he would die if he let go, then he could keep going. The coach introduced the reporter to Shinkawa and suggested he consider streaming his training in the future. She introduced herself as Tsuji Soa from rank 7. They moved into a side room to conduct the interview. She began by expressing her curiosity about his previous match. Given that Harayama remained undefeated, many believed Shinkawa had no real chance. She asked for his thoughts on that. Shinkawa simply said he didn't think much of it. To him, this was no different from facing Oji. She followed up, asking if that meant he was confident he could defeat Harayama. With calm determination, Shinkawa answered that no matter how the match went, he had made a promise to win, and he intended to keep it. She then asked how he had changed since his amateur days. Shinkawa replied that back then he didn't have much luck, but now it seemed like luck had finally caught up with him. She smiled, commenting that luck was a kind of skill too. Next, she asked what got him into martial arts in the first place. Shinkawa's expression darkened slightly as he remembered. He had been bullied as a kid, beaten down by delinquents. The memory of being punched and unable to fight back lingered clearly in his mind. The reporter was surprised. Shinkawa had been bullied in high school. He confirmed it, though he added there were various other reasons why he eventually dropped out. Still, she concluded that martial arts had become his way of fighting back, a response to a past where he felt powerless. Meanwhile, outside the room, a few gym members peeked through the slightly open door. One of them whispered that Shinkawa was surprisingly good at interviews. But then they noticed something else. Someone in the gym had started a live stream. The streamer grinned at the camera and declared that he was about to show the world what happens when an extremely strong regular person fights an amateur martial artist, right here, live. The reporter concluded the interview, thanking Shinkawa for his time and assuring him they'd be cautious with the information they shared. She then asked if they could capture some footage of him training. Shinkawa gave a brief nod, granting permission. Takashi entered the room shortly after. He asked if Shinkawa remembered a guy named Okitsuyoshi from high school. Without waiting for a response, he answered his own question, mentioning that he would allow the man to observe for now since Shinkawa was being interviewed. He added that the guy seemed to be a YouTuber, but had no manners whatsoever. Takashi questioned whether the man was really Shinkawa's friend, then commented that the guy hadn't even known Kento had gone pro. Shinkawa clarified that Oki wasn't a friend, just a former classmate. Meanwhile, the reporter instructed the cameraman to keep recording. As Shinkawa and Takashi observed the YouTuber from across the room, Takashi offered to create an excuse and send him away. Shinkawa declined, saying he would handle it personally. Takashi reminded him that this was a critical time, but Shinkawa reassured him that everything was fine. Shinkawa approached the YouTuber calmly. The YouTuber greeted him with exaggerated friendliness, pretending they were long-lost friends. He remarked that he'd heard Shinkawa had been training and claimed he had found the gym through some amateur friends. Shinkawa asked directly what he was there for. The YouTuber smiled, still putting on a show for his stream, and said he was just visiting an old friend. He explained that his viewers were curious to see what would happen if an extremely tough civilian fought a former wimp-turned-amateur fighter. Shinkawa, unfazed, told him to ask one of his amateur friends instead. The YouTuber dismissed the idea, stating that his friend had always been strong and that a fight between the two wouldn't make for good content. Shinkawa, he said, was perfect for this kind of video. The YouTuber then pleaded for the match, revealing that he had already hinted to his audience about Shinkawa. He asked once more, framing it as a favor between friends. Shinkawa, his expression unchanging, responded coldly. What he remembered from back then wasn't friendship, only being used as a punching bag. The YouTuber laughed awkwardly, brushing it off as youthful aggression. He insisted they were just hot-blooded kids and suggested they settle it with a serious sparring match to make up like real men. Shinkawa replied that professional fighters weren't supposed to spar seriously with civilians. The YouTuber mocked him in return, pointing out that an amateur with a 10-fight losing streak had no right to call himself a pro. Smirking, he added that if Shinkawa was embarrassed, he'd blur his face in the footage. Shinkawa calmly told him there was already a scheduled 3-round sparring match coming up. He advised the YouTuber to stretch for 20 minutes and wait. The YouTuber grinned, seemingly pleased. He told his viewers to stay tuned, promising them a live stream where a civilian would completely destroy an amateur fighter. Everyone in the gym heard the comment. Annoyance rippled through the room. The YouTuber set up his camera, pretending to stretch while deliberately angling it to capture Shinkawa's sparring match in the background. Elsewhere, Shinkawa stood beside his coach. The coach mentioned that he had heard everything from Takashi and warned that the situation wasn't ideal. Harayama, the reigning champion, was likely watching and analyzing every bit of footage available. Still, the coach saw an opportunity. If they played it right, they could use this moment to make the champion lower his guard. The coach instructed Shinkawa to stick to his usual striking flow. When Takashi attempted a takedown, he was to defend and then loosen up, give the champion something to overanalyze. Both Shinkawa and Takashi changed into their training gear. As the cameras rolled, the two fighters touched gloves and began their sparring match. Shinkawa struck first, delivering a swift kick that Takashi blocked just in time. The force was intense, enough to draw a reaction from the YouTuber, who watched wide-eyed from across the room. Takashi fired back with a straight punch aimed at Shinkawa's face. Shinkawa blocked it cleanly with his gloves, then countered with a sharp jab of his own. Takashi leaned back and avoided the hit with precision. Shinkawa moved forward again, launching another attack. Takashi remained composed, dodging the incoming strike. He retaliated quickly, but Shinkawa blocked once more with tight defense. Both fighters threw punches at the same time. Shinkawa's fist connected with Takashi's jaw, while Takashi's punch sailed past its mark. As Takashi staggered slightly to regain balance, Shinkawa seized the moment. With perfect timing, he stepped in and unleashed a brutal uppercut that landed squarely on Takashi's chin. The YouTuber's jaw dropped, his livestream chat exploded.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
If you don't want to be caught slipping like that clueless streamer, hit subscribe and ring that bell, join the squad and stay in the loop. Shinkawa and Takashi clashed with relentless intensity, fists flying in a blur of motion. Each blow echoed through the gym as the two fighters exchanged strikes without pause, their bodies moving like machines trained for war. Meanwhile, the comment section online erupted with chatter about Shinkawa. Viewers were in awe of how he had taken down the third-ranked lightweight in just 27 seconds. Some recounted how he boldly declared war on the reigning champion, while others joked about how the YouTuber was about to get destroyed. Watching the sparring match unfold, the YouTuber finally grasped the reality of Shinkawa's strength. It was far beyond what he had anticipated. Around him, the gym members murmured about Shinkawa's potential, speculating that he might be the one to take the belt soon. Hearing this, the YouTuber quickly made an excuse, claiming the camera had suddenly stopped working and the battery was almost dead. As he tried to sneak out of the situation, a reporter approached and asked him why Shinkawa had said the two were not friends, just former classmates. Before he could respond, Shinkawa appeared right in front of him and asked if he was ready. The YouTuber immediately tried to backpedal, insisting there had been a misunderstanding and suggesting they just forget the whole thing. Shinkawa simply asked whether he didn't want to spar anymore. Then, letting out a sigh, Shinkawa told him to leave if he wasn't going to follow through. As the YouTuber began packing up his camera, clearly trying to exit, Takashi stepped in and grabbed him, questioning whether he really planned to leave without even apologizing. The YouTuber, visibly shaken, muttered that it was none of Takashi's business. Shinkawa intervened again, telling the others to let him go. He remarked that an apology wouldn't rewind time anyway. However, another member of Shinkawa's team cut in, pointing out that the YouTuber had barged in and caused a scene. He should at least try to make amends. Soon, more gym members surrounded him, their presence pressuring him to act. Cornered and humiliated, the YouTuber finally bowed his head and apologized to Shinkawa. The comment section, always unforgiving, exploded once again. Users mocked the moment, joking that this was the biggest boomerang effect they'd ever seen, while others compared it to an anger management session. But as he bowed, the YouTuber's expression shifted. Beneath the act of submission, a sinister glint appeared in his eyes, an ominous hint that he had something else in mind. The scene shifted to a quiet office tucked away inside a university hospital. Shinkawa sat across from a doctor, the atmosphere calm, but weighed down by something unspoken. She studied him for a moment, her expression a careful mix of curiosity and concern. Then, gently, she asked how he had felt when the YouTuber bowed and apologized. He told her as much. The apology hadn't meant anything, not really. That single act of remorse couldn't erase the past. It couldn't undo the damage. In that silence, he found himself walking through the doors of a martial arts gym, not because he was chasing a dream, but because there was nowhere else to go. He needed to feel something, anything, that would remind him he was still alive. The doctor listened, saying nothing at first. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. She said that in life, pain was unavoidable. Everyone gets hurt. It's part of living, part of growing. Some wounds are visible, others are buried deeper. But the ones that don't heal, the ones that linger far longer than they should, those become something else entirely, a deeper wound, a wound of the heart. That's what trauma is. She offered a quiet suggestion, one way to begin healing. It involved recognizing the present self, realizing that who he is now is not the same person he was back then. Growth doesn't erase the past, but it changes who carries it. Then she asked if he could meet his past self, what would he say? In his mind, Shinkawa saw it clearly, a version of himself lying on the floor, bruised, defeated, empty. That version of him had no strength left to stand, no fire, no direction. He looked down at that old self and thought, if I can overcome this pain, I'll become even stronger. The doctor raised an eyebrow and remarked that it sounded familiar. She asked if he knew where the words came from. Shinkawa shook his head. She told him it was from a German philosopher, a reminder that strength is often forged through suffering. He didn't care who said it. Back then, during those hellish nights, it was the only thing that kept him going. Later that evening, Shinkawa stepped out of the hospital. In his hand was a small white bag, the prescription the doctor had written for him. The city lights shimmered in puddles on the sidewalk as he walked. Everything felt oddly quiet. Eventually, he reached his apartment building. The stairwell was dim, lit only by a flickering bulb. As he began descending the steps, a strange feeling crept in, a gut instinct. Someone was waiting. At the bottom of the stairs, the YouTuber stood, no longer alone. Several delinquents flanked him, their eyes cold, posture aggressive. With a sneer, the YouTuber mocked the place, asking if Shinkawa was still living in this filthy dump. His voice dripped with resentment as he ranted about how Shinkawa had ruined his channel, how he was going to pay for it. In his hand, he gripped an electric taser. But Shinkawa didn't flinch, he didn't move, he didn't even blink. Then slowly, Shinkawa's lips curled into a smirk, calm and unreadable, the same expression that said more than words ever could. At the same time, the reigning champion was watching Shinkawa's sparring, which had been uploaded to the delinquent YouTuber's channel, and his coach commented that he had no idea how the footage had been recorded. However, judging from the comments, it clearly didn't seem staged. The scene shifted back to the alleyway. Shinkawa's took quick action. He moved first, delivering a sharp kick to the man in the blue shirt. As that played out, the champion and his coach continued their conversation. The champion analyzed that Shinkawa's debut match against Oji had ended so quickly, he hadn't realized just how much power Shinkawa packed into his punches. The scene shifted back again. Shinkawa swiftly ducked and dodged as the attackers swung at him with bats. The champion observed that Shinkawa's defense wasn't bad. Most of the blows failed to land, and his quick judgment allowed him to evade even under pressure. While Shinkawa continued to dodge the wild swings, the coach pointed out that some of Shinkawa's flaws were becoming visible, especially his wrestling defense. Right then, one of the delinquents charged at Shinkawa, aiming for a takedown by grabbing his legs, but Shinkawa stepped forward and drove his knee into the man's face, delivering a devastating counterattack. The champion remarked that Shinkawa's distance control was a bit off, except when it came to punches. The coach added that it was no surprise Shinkawa had taken so many leg kicks in his earlier alleyway fight against Oji. Now only the YouTuber remained standing. All the other delinquents were lying on the ground after being beaten down by Shinkawa. Shinkawa's told the YouTuber that he hadn't grown at all. In a panic, the YouTuber pulled out a knife. Shinkawa grabbed his hand and stepped in close. A scream echoed through the alleyway. Back in the gym, the coach asked the champion what he planned to do next. The champion replied that as long as he was cautious of Shinkawa's punches, the match should be simple. The coach warned that Shinkawa would likely sharpen his wrestling and sprawl defense as well. But the champion, full of confidence, claimed that no matter how much Shinkawa trained, it wouldn't be enough to stop his tackles. He doubted Shinkawa would even be able to react. Still, the coach advised him not to get overconfident. He reminded the champion that they couldn't afford to make mistakes, especially if they wanted to reach the UFC. The champion agreed. He acknowledged that he would soon turn 37 and only had 3 years left in the sport. After that, he planned to retire. He also had to consider his family. Mika had told him she didn't want to see her father getting hit in the ring. He had promised his wife that if he lost even once, he would walk away from fighting. Looking at a family photo, he admitted he had started this journey for them in the first place. The weight he carried was different from that of a young punk like Shinkawa. That was exactly why he couldn't afford to lose. The scene transitioned back to Shinkawa. He stood in silence, staring at his bloodied hand. After a moment of reflection, he began washing it clean. Time passed. The day of the fight arrived. Both fighters stood face to face. The champion held his MMA belt, raising it to taunt Shinkawa. He told him outright that the belt wasn't his to take and he should give up. During a press event, the announcer turned to Shinkawa. With the fight just a day away, he asked how Shinkawa felt about receiving an offer from the undefeated champion Harayama, who held a perfect record of 9 wins in 9 fights. Without any visible emotion, Shinkawa simply stated that he wanted to get in the ring as soon as possible. The announcer noted that in his last match, Shinkawa had made good on his promise of a first-round knockout. He asked what kind of fight fans could expect this time. Shinkawa, now filled with determination, declared that he would put his life on the line to win. The announcer then turned to the champion and asked for his thoughts on Shinkawa's bold statement. The champion expressed doubt, questioning whether someone so young truly understood what it meant to risk everything in the ring. He said he intended to teach Shinkawa the true meaning of life and death. When asked whether he too was staking his life in this fight, the champion answered that there had never been a match where he hadn't put everything on the line. As always, he would fight and win for his family. Turning to Shinkawa, the champion added that the higher his expectations, the greater the disappointment would be when he failed. But even if he lost, he hoped the young fighter wouldn't let it break him. After all, he still had his whole life ahead of him. Shinkawa unexpectedly remembered the champion on television, noticed how much the man genuinely cared about his daughter. It struck him, was the champion truly putting his life on the line for his family? The champion, meanwhile, was confused. Why was Shinkawa provoking him with irrelevant comments? But Shinkawa pressed on, saying that he understood the meaning behind it all. The two fighters locked eyes, their gazes intense and unwavering. Neither gave an inch as they faced off, eventually taking their fighting stances. The scene shifted to an office where a lady reporter was typing. Her article previewed the upcoming FFC Lightweight Championship. A rising star who shot up the rankings on debut would face the undefeated champion with a 9-win, 0-loss record. Never in MMA history had an amateur with 11 straight losses become champion after just 2 pro fights. If Shinkawa won, he'd also become the youngest champion in FFC history. The scene changed once more. Shinkawa walked into the arena, accompanied by his coach. The story was far from over. Would Shinkawa be able to deliver another overwhelming performance like last time? The coach offered Shinkawa one final piece of advice before the match began. He told him to take control of the fight's rhythm, to stay calm, and to trust the strategy they had meticulously prepared. With that, Shinkawa stepped into the octagon, his expression focused and his body tense with anticipation. As he turned, his eyes caught sight of the FFC president seated near the cage. This time, the crowd was larger, louder, and more animated than ever before. Their voices rose together, chanting the name of the undefeated champion Harayama. Inside the cage, Harayama stood composed and motionless, his calm presence sharply contrasting the frenzy of the audience. He looked every bit the reigning champion, relaxed, unreadable, and dangerous. Just outside the octagon, the president's assistant noticed a sharp-eyed man observing the match with careful attention. She leaned toward the president and quietly informed him that the man was from the UFC. The president responded, explaining that he had been sent by John Shalby himself to witness Harayama's performance firsthand. The assistant, intrigued, remarked on Harayama's unbeaten record. She assumed he had the potential to compete abroad and wondered why the UFC hadn't shown interest earlier. The president explained that dominance alone didn't tell the full story. In fighting, it mattered not just how a fighter won, but how they handled defeat. Even the UFC couldn't yet judge whether Harayama was the kind of fighter who would collapse after a single loss, or one who would grit his teeth, rise, and claw his way back. That uncertainty was what held them back. Back inside the cage, both fighters stood still as a cameraman slowly circled them, capturing every tense second. The referee held the championship belt high in the air, a silent declaration of what was at stake. The audience held its breath. Positioned between the fighters, the referee glanced at each of them and confirmed their readiness. With a swift hand signal, the match officially began. Without hesitation, Harayama exploded forward like a predator closing in on its prey. To Shinkawa, the motion felt less like a charge and more like a wild beast breaking loose. Harayama's punch, extended with his long reach, came fast. Shinkawa raised his arm to block and instantly recognized a problem. Harayama's reach was immense, almost unnatural. It felt like facing a spearman while holding only a sword. In his mind, he visualized it clearly, Harayama wielding a spear with ease while he clutched a short blade. Shinkawa retaliated quickly, aiming a counterpunch, but Harayama intercepted it midair with a clean hook. The timing was perfect. Immediately, Harayama followed with a sharp strike aimed directly at Shinkawa's face. The blow landed flush, forcing Shinkawa to step back and reassess. He realized that even when he tried to jab, Harayama's lead hand was always there, constantly disrupting his rhythm and breaking his timing. Tried again, jabbing toward his opponent, but Harayama used his palm to push and redirect the punch. Each of Shinkawa's attempts met the same fate. Whenever he launched an attack, a swift counterattack came flying back. Frustration built as his punches were blocked or slipped, and his defense was constantly tested. Then came a sudden kick, unexpected and forceful. It slipped through his guard and landed against his ribs, the impact jarring. Shinkawa gritted his teeth and felt the pain surge through his side. From outside the cage, the coach called out, urging him to maintain his rhythm, to endure the pain, and to resist the urge to flinch. Shinkawa nodded slightly, regaining his focus. The president, still watching with a keen eye, made a quiet observation in his mind. A southpaw with a long reach posed a unique challenge for someone like Shinkawa, who relied heavily on clean punches and fast counters. The assistant asked why such an advantage existed, why being left-handed made such a difference. The president clarified that most fighters were orthodox, meaning they fought with their right hand forward. As a result, they rarely faced southpaws, but southpaw fighters, by contrast, had to face orthodox opponents regularly. This constant exposure gave them a subtle yet powerful edge in timing, distance, and angles. The fight continued with Harayama firmly in control. Another strike caught Shinkawa in the face. The sting brought with it a memory, one of countless dreamlike battles he had fought within his mind. In those dreams, there were no weight classes. He had faced warriors of all shapes and sizes, but not once had he ever fought a left-handed opponent. The realization hit with a quiet weight. This was unfamiliar territory. Harayama pressed the attack, delivering a relentless stream of strikes that kept Shinkawa on the defensive. In the midst of it, Shinkawa's thoughts turned again, this time to the ancient phalanx formation. In that tactic, soldiers would line up with shields on their left arms and spears in their right hands, forming an impenetrable wall. The left hand was essential. Every soldier needed to follow that design. Left-handed warriors had no place in that order. He connected the thought to the present moment. This truly was his first encounter with a southpaw. The difference was undeniable. Outside the cage, both the president and the UFC observer continued to study the match carefully. Harayama, still composed, began to taunt Shinkawa. He questioned the confidence in Shinkawa's fists, mocked his ambition for the championship belt, and declared that he didn't have what it took. Then, with brutal intent, Harayama charged again, launching another powerful punch. This time, Shinkawa leaned to the right and narrowly avoided the blow. As Harayama's punch passed by, Shinkawa mimicked his opponent's earlier movements with precision. Using his left hand, he threw a punch, one that mirrored Harayama's technique exactly. In that moment, the crowd gasped. It was not just a punch, it was a statement. Shinkawa had seen the shape of his opponent's style, and he had begun to adapt. Harayama flinched in pain, his face contorting from the unexpected strike. His head jerked slightly to the side, clearly stunned by Shinkawa's sudden switch in stance. The sharp southpaw punch had landed cleanly. Outside the octagon, Shinkawa's coach shouted with excitement, realizing immediately what had just happened. Shinkawa had begun utilizing a southpaw approach, mirroring the champion's techniques. The president, observing from the stands, narrowed his eyes as he noticed the subtle yet significant change. The UFC observer, seated beside him, continued watching silently, his gaze never leaving the fighters. Unlike the others, he showed no reaction, only silent calculation. Shinkawa now fought with his left hand forward, adapting to the southpaw style with growing control. He maintained his distance and tested Harayama with measured attacks. Harayama ducked under a wide hook and smoothly dodged a follow-up jab, leaning his torso backward with calculated precision. The punch missed by inches. Suddenly, Harayama lunged forward with a powerful punch, aiming directly for Shinkawa's head. But Shinkawa shifted to the side just in time. The fist grazed him but failed to land cleanly. A tense moment followed. The two stood in the center of the octagon, their gazes locked. A mutual silence filled the air. Each studied the other's movement, waiting for the smallest mistake to exploit. It was a stalemate, a brief pause before the next storm. In that stillness, memories resurfaced in Shinkawa's mind. His thoughts drifted back into the recurring dream that had haunted him throughout his training. In that world, countless soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, most of them civilians with families. These were not warriors by nature. They had no desire for bloodshed, no hunger for glory. But to survive, they had formed ranks, lifted their shields, and held the line. They fought not to conquer, but to protect. Yet among them were those who had no choice. Slaves, unarmed, unnamed, and unseen. They were thrown to the front where arrows rained down and spears tore through the flesh. They couldn't rely on ranks or shields. Instead, they charged blindly, risking their lives to scatter the enemy's formation. In those dreams, Shinkawa had always been one of them, one of the expendables, surviving through instinct, grit, and pain. Back in the present, Harayama extended his long arm and launched a powerful jab. Shinkawa dodged once more, stepping out of range. As the blow passed harmlessly by, Shinkawa remembered the words Harayama had spoken during their face-off. The champion had claimed that Shinkawa didn't understand what it meant to risk everything. But he did. He knew it deeply intimately. Victory wasn't a choice, it was survival, and if he couldn't win now, there would be no second chance. Only defeat, only death. He pressed forward, willingly stepping into Harayama's range despite the blows. Harayama analyzed the aggression, concluding that Shinkawa had abandoned all form. It looked like desperation. From Harayama's perspective, Shinkawa was simply swinging with everything he had, attempting to overwhelm him with brute force and reckless courage, trying to turn this match into a chaotic brawl. Harayama's coach called out, urging him to push Shinkawa back. Harayama responded instantly, unleashing a sharp kick that cracked against Shinkawa's side. Despite the pain, Shinkawa continued forward. His body absorbed the strike, but his eyes never wavered. He charged again. Harayama retaliated with another punch, missed. A second punch also dodged. Realizing his strikes weren't landing, Harayama adjusted his tactics and delivered a brutal leg kick. The impact landed cleanly. Pain surged through Shinkawa's leg, his balance faltered slightly and a grimace crossed his face. The audience could see it, Shinkawa was hurting. Seizing the opportunity, Harayama lowered his level and drove forward with a takedown attempt. But Shinkawa, anticipating the move, sprawled with perfect timing. His hips dropped, denying the takedown, yet it was a ruse. Harayama had feinted the tackle. As he closed in, he switched tactics again, throwing a heavy punch at point-blank range. It connected. Shinkawa's body jolted from the hit. Without pause, Harayama resumed the takedown, wrapping his arms around Shinkawa and driving him to the canvas. Now Harayama was on top, pressing Shinkawa against the mat. From the outside, his coach yelled for a counter. Shinkawa responded, using his hips to shift, attempting to throw Harayama off. Harayama tightened his position and unleashed a flurry of punches. He was trying to end the match. Strike after strike rained down as he capitalized on his dominant position. Shinkawa's body took the punishment, but his mind remained focused. Harayama lifted his arm for a final, decisive blow, but before it could land, Shinkawa acted. With one foot braced against the cage, he pushed with all his strength, twisting his body in a fluid motion. Harayama was thrown off, flipped over by the sudden reversal. The crowd gasped. Even the president and UFC observer leaned forward, surprised by the maneuver. Shinkawa didn't hesitate. He quickly latched onto Harayama's arm and secured an arm lock. The hold was tight. Harayama's face tensed as the pain registered. He tried to twist free, but the position was solid. Shinkawa had control now. As Shinkawa applied pressure to the lock, something deeper stirred within him. His vision blurred once again. In his mind, he stood not in a modern cage, but within the walls of an ancient coliseum. The crowds were no longer chanting his name, they screamed for blood. They demanded a kill. His opponent lay beneath him, and his own hands gripped the imaginary neck of a fallen warrior. In that moment, his kindling urge surged. He could feel it, the beast inside him, whispering for him to finish it. He imagined himself twisting Harayama's neck, ending it right there in front of the roaring crowd. In reality, both the referee and Shinkawa's coach were shouting at him to stop. Their voices pierced through the noise of the crowd, but Shinkawa didn't register them, not right away. His mind was still lost in the echoing arena of his imagination, locked in a trance born from instinct and adrenaline. What finally pulled him back was a different voice, soft, yet cutting through the chaos like a blade. It was Harayama's wife, calling out from the stands, her voice filled with fear and concern. At once, Shinkawa's eyes widened. Awareness returned to him. He snapped out of the violent haze and released the armbar without hesitation. He sprang backward, landing on his feet in a stance that looked almost like Spider-Man crouched on a rooftop. The referee rushed to Harayama's side, quickly checking the condition of the former champion. Medical staff moved in, but Harayama raised a hand, signaling he was fine if shaken. Shinkawa stood still, watching in silence, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths as the last traces of fury faded from his eyes. Meanwhile, the president's assistant noticed something odd. The UFC observer had already left his seat and was heading toward the exit. With curiosity piqued, she quickly followed, trying to catch up. Inside the octagon, Shinkawa's teammates flooded in, cheering and congratulating him with wide grins and pounding fists. It was a celebration, raw, chaotic, and earned. One of them jokingly remarked how they'd only drilled grappling defense and taught him a single offensive technique. And yet somehow Shinkawa had pulled off a reverse armbar, using the cage in a way that shocked even the coaching staff. The comment came with laughter and awe. Did Ronda Rousey possess him or something? Rousey, the first female UFC champion, had famously finished 9 of her 13 fights using an armbar. Now, Shinkawa had pulled off a similar feat, his first ever offensive grappling move, executed in the heat of the moment under unimaginable pressure. The coach, still catching his breath, shook his head and muttered that Shinkawa had become a monster inside the ring. Shinkawa stood nearby, letting the words sink in. For a moment, his mind drifted back to the dream, the battlefield, the helpless soldiers, the endless fight. Kill or be killed. That's what it had always been. That was the truth behind his strength. Across from them, Harayama slowly rose to his feet, sore but composed. He approached Shinkawa and nodded respectfully. He hadn't expected the rookie to refine his grappling so well, but he acknowledged the outcome. He called him champion, and it wasn't sarcasm, it was sincere. The commentary team continued their broadcast, their voices excited as they analyzed the fight. They announced that Harayama, the undefeated lightweight champion, had passed on the belt. A new king had risen. Shinkawa had just become the youngest champion in FFC history, and the entire match had lasted just 2 minutes and 49 seconds. The experts had all been proven wrong. He had won against every prediction with raw talent and sheer will. One of the commentators mentioned that there had been an offer from the UUFC for Harayama. This was supposed to be the proving ground, but instead of showing his dominance, the champion had fallen to a rookie. The tides had turned. Backstage, the assistant returned to the president and shared what she had overheard. The UUFC observer was already on the phone with John Shalby, their number 2 executive. She couldn't hear the full conversation, but she was certain they were talking about Shinkawa. The president clenched his jaw. In his mind, the pieces were falling into place. Shalby was after Shinkawa now. His grip tightened, and with a scowl, he muttered that he absolutely wouldn't let him go. Shinkawa is mine, he thought bitterly. Then, the spotlight turned again to Harayama. Holding the microphone in the center of the octagon, his face still bruised, he shocked the arena by announcing his retirement from active competition. The crowd gasped. The president's face twisted in disbelief and frustration. But Harayama remained calm. He admitted his disappointment, but acknowledged that Shinkawa had won fair and square. There was no shame in this loss. He explained that he didn't have much time left to grow as a fighter, and this was a clear sign that the new generation had arrived. Looking toward his wife in the crowd, he said the decision was for his family. He handed the microphone back, bowed his head slightly, and walked away, graceful in defeat. Then the spotlight turned to Shinkawa. The announcer handed him the mic and asked how he felt after becoming champion. Shinkawa raised the belt above his head and said that he wanted to fight again as soon as possible. He believed the ring was where he truly belonged. With fierce conviction, he stated that depending on the situation, he'd fight twice in a single day if needed. He looked into the crowd, eyes burning with passion, and challenged every fighter watching. He told them not to be afraid. To keep challenging him, he would take on all comers. Then, without another word, Shinkawa handed the mic back and exited the octagon, the championship belt on his shoulder and his coach walking beside him. Quick correction. Earlier I said southpaw means left-handed and orthodox means right-handed, to be clear. Orthodox stance: a fighter has their left foot forward and their right hand is the nearest to their face. Southpaw stance: the southpaw stance is the opposite to an orthodox, as your right foot is forward and your left hand is back nearest to your face. As the coach and Shinkawa stepped into the backstage corridor, they were immediately greeted by the FFC president, who was practically bursting with excitement. He congratulated them warmly, proclaiming that Shinkawa had not only seized the championship but had now become the very face of the FFC organization. Then, turning to the coach, and at long last putting a name to the figure who had stood silently behind the scenes, he addressed him as Shiraishi. With a steady nod, Shiraishi accepted the praise, simply replying that it was all the result of Shinkawa's relentless hard work until the very end. The president shifted to business, nodding that Shinkawa's champion status made it imperative to sign an exclusive contract with the FFC. He explained that without affiliation, Shinkawa would miss out on high-profile bouts, but under contract the organization could arrange as many fights as he desired, against top-tier opponents, and secure significantly higher purses. Shiraishi requested time to consider the offer, stressing the need for careful deliberation. The president cautioned that the opportunity was fleeting and urged them to strike while the iron was hot. Shiraishi respectfully assured him they would confer and respond promptly. As the president departed, Shinkawa turned to his coach, questioning the decision to delay acceptance. He explained that money and conditions mattered little to him compared to the chance to keep fighting. Shiraishi revealed that John Shalby, the UUFC's number 2 executive, had already contacted them to express interest in Shinkawa after scouting the recent match. Outside the changing rooms, the president's assistant approached and asked how the meeting had gone. The president, visibly irritated, explained that the very fact they had put everything on hold without even hearing the conditions meant that UUFC had already made their move. He guessed they wouldn't jump into contract negotiations immediately, but were likely planning to decide based on a test match. He stressed that Shinkawa was a fighter he had personally discovered and pushed all the way to becoming a champion, and he wasn't about to let him go so easily. When the assistant cautiously asked what he planned to do about it, the president replied with a cold resolve: he would stop it by any means necessary. The scene shifted to a university hospital. The doctor asked about the hallucinations and the intense urge to kill that had surfaced during the match. Shinkawa confirmed and described how the killing instinct took over him. He imagined breaking his opponent's arm and twisting his neck. He explained that instinctively he saw his opponent as an enemy who should be killed. The doctor asked how he managed to suppress those feelings. Shinkawa recalled hearing a voice, but when the doctor suggested it might be an auditory hallucination, Shinkawa denied it. He explained that it was the opponent's wife screaming, and that was when he snapped back to his senses. He admitted that in the moment, his family from his dreams came to mind. The doctor asked if he had a family in his dreams, to which he confirmed. Though he had lost them in the war, even though it was just a dream, he still felt deep love for them and couldn't forget the sadness of losing them. The doctor decided to add one more medication, and he asked what kind of medicine it was. She explained that it was an atypical antipsychotic, a medication designed to suppress hallucinations and delusions. He inquired whether the medication would show up in doping tests, to which she confirmed it would not. She reassured him that it had no effects that would enhance athletic performance. When he asked about potential side effects, she explained that at first he might feel slightly heavy or his tongue might become numb. There was also the possibility of drowsiness. He concluded that his movements might become dull. However, she advised that the medication had recently been improved and she did not believe the side effects would be as severe. Afterward, Shinkawa left the doctor's office and retrieved his medication from the front desk. Meanwhile, the doctor in her office began analyzing Shinkawa's case. His ongoing struggles with fighting and the persistent hallucinations and delusions, which had lasted over a month, led her to consider the possibility of schizophrenia. She thought of the former UFC inaugural lightweight champion, Tony Ferguson, a fighter who had achieved 100 consecutive wins and risen to become the UFC's first interim lightweight champion. At the peak of his career, Ferguson was struck by schizophrenia. As his hallucinations and delusions worsened, he began to harm those around him. At the urging of his family, he sought psychiatric help, where he was prescribed risperidone, an antipsychotic medication for schizophrenia. However, the side effects of the drug made weight cutting difficult, leading to losses in his fights. As a result, he lost his champion title. At this rate, Shinkawa might be facing the same outcome. Before the doctor could finish her thoughts, the scene shifted. Shinkawa, having left the university hospital, glanced at his medication before tossing it into the trash. His expression was grim as he left the building, running. In the gym, Shinkawa was wrapping his hands, getting ready for his training session. Once finished, he stepped into the ring to start his workout with his coach, Shiraishi. Meanwhile, one of Shinkawa's friends, holding his phone, sees on social media everyone was talking about Shinkawa. He was confused, wondering how Shinkawa had suddenly become so strong. Takashi, overhearing, replied that Shinkawa had put in a lot of hard work to get to this point. The guy responded saying that Shinkawa had been working hard before too, but hadn't made any progress, and he couldn't understand what had changed. Takashi explained that perhaps Shinkawa had been dealing with mental struggles in the past. The guy then commented that Shinkawa now appeared almost emotionless. The training session between Shinkawa and his coach continued. Shinkawa charged forward, but the coach swiftly leaned back, narrowly avoiding the strike. The coach then countered with a leg kick. After a quick tackle, he pushed Shinkawa to the ground. Shinkawa resisted, remaining on his feet. In response, Shinkawa swept the coach's leg, tripping him and making him fall. The coach reacted quickly, locking Shinkawa in an arm lock. Unable to bear the pain, Shinkawa tapped out. The guys watching the match praised the coach, saying he was in his prime. The coach then advised Shinkawa, acknowledging his talent but explaining that he needed to learn how to lose a battle in order to win the war. Shinkawa was confused by the advice. One of the guys then gave a phone to the coach. The call was from the president of the FFC. The president expressed concern that he hadn't heard back from the coach and mentioned rumors about a UFC test match. The coach confirmed that a test match was scheduled, but the president warned that such a match didn't guarantee Shinkawa would make it into the UFC. Even if Shinkawa won, the UFC would decide when to call him up. The president also pointed out that Shinkawa's name recognition was still too low, with only 2 fights under his belt. Instead of a test match that wouldn't bring any earnings, the president proposed an alternative, a title match against Big Thunder where Shinkawa would fight as the FFC representative. The coach and Shinkawa exchanged glances, and the coach replied that a match with a well-known organization would certainly generate buzz. If Shinkawa could fight their champion, he would surely be happy to accept. The president said he would contact them once the schedule was set. The president closed the phone, and the assistant quietly stated that everything was going as planned. She then added that if Shinkawa were defeated by their champion, the UFC might withdraw their interest. The president responded that it would be ideal. However, he also pointed out that even if Shinkawa won, an injury during the fight would prevent him from showcasing his true potential in the test match. A sinister look crossed his face. Meanwhile, in the gym, Shinkawa continued his training. Later in the gym, Shinkawa and his coach sat down to talk. The coach informed Shinkawa that he had transferred 300,000 yen to him. While it wasn't as much as the Oji fight, it was still a significant amount for fighters. The coach explained that if a fighter got injured, they were essentially unemployed until they recovered, and if their mental state was affected, it would be even more difficult to continue fighting. He advised Shinkawa to make money while he could, and suggested that he could even teach private lessons as a part-time job. The coach added that the gym had been flooded with requests from people wanting private lessons from the champion, most of whom probably just wanted him to teach them gently. 2 days later, on the day of the private lesson, a young boy named Jun was waiting in the gym. Shinkawa watched him for a moment before asking one of the members about the kid. The member explained that Jun had been bullied at school and had joined the gym after reading an article. The member confirmed that the kid's name was Jun Iketani. Jun, bowing his head, expressed how glad he was to meet Shinkawa. Shinkawa looked at him with a serious, intimidating expression. Shinkawa bluntly asked Jun if he was being bullied at school. Jun confirmed it with a nod. Shinkawa continued, questioning why Jun did not fight back. Jun hesitated, trying to explain, but Shinkawa interrupted and called it admirable. Shinkawa stated that it was proof Jun had been raised well, emphasizing that it was normal not to enjoy hurting others. Shinkawa then addressed Jun's curiosity about his own feelings toward fighting. He explained that he once felt the same way but had since stopped running from fights. Shinkawa decided to teach Jun immediately, choosing boxing as the first martial art, not because it was the strongest, but because it involved the part of the body most resistant to causing harm. Training began with light jump rope exercises. Shinkawa handed Jun a jump rope and supervised him as he started skipping. Afterwards, Shinkawa taught Jun the basic forms, carefully correcting his posture and movement. Members of the gym observed the session, quietly remarking that Shinkawa, contrary to expectations, demonstrated a natural talent for teaching. Some speculated that Shinkawa saw a reflection of his younger self in Jun. After the session, Jun expressed gratitude, marking the conclusion of his first day. Later, the coach approached Shinkawa and confirmed that Jun was indeed being bullied. Shinkawa stated that was why he had decided to teach him boxing. The coach noted that with 2 to 3 months of consistent training, Jun would be able to defend himself in most situations. Shinkawa suggested that it might happen even sooner, believing Jun showed natural ability. The coach then shifted the conversation to Shinkawa's upcoming match. Scheduled for the 4th of next month, Shinkawa would face Uyu Tenshin, the lightweight champion from another organization. The coach explained that Uyu was regarded as one of the top fighters in the country and would be a formidable opponent, at a level Shinkawa had not yet faced. He warned Shinkawa to be cautious and advised that if he took too much damage, he should consider forfeiting. Despite his reluctance to forfeit, Shinkawa listened as the coach emphasized the importance of preserving himself for the upcoming UFC test match, scheduled just 2 weeks after the Uyu fight. In that match, Shinkawa would face Rose Conran, an unranked but highly promising fighter from Africa. The coach acknowledged the difficulty of preparing for 2 fighters with completely different styles in such a short period. Shinkawa responded firmly, stating that he would handle both matches. Both were critical opportunities for his career. The coach mentioned that the president had no intention of losing Shinkawa and had arranged a substantial fight purse to keep him motivated. When Shinkawa asked about the amount, the coach replied that it was 30, a respectable sum for a domestic event match. 30 what exactly? Look guys, I have no idea, he just said 30 and moved on like we were all supposed to understand. Hopefully, we'll find out later. The coach then reminded Shinkawa not to become complacent just because of the money. Time passed and Shinkawa continued Jun's training. Since Jun was left-handed, Shinkawa taught him to use his left hand for attacks, unless he was certain he could finish an opponent. He instructed Jun to always guard his chin and maintain a stable center of gravity. Shinkawa demonstrated steady upper body movement and strategic stepping, explaining that landing 2 or 3 precise hits with proper form would be more effective than seeking a single powerful strike. He emphasized that this was the way to defeat larger and stronger opponents. The coach observed the training sessions quietly, nodding the steady progress. The day of departure for the match against Uyu arrived. The coach went to Shinkawa's apartment to pick him up. When the door opened, the coach was shocked by the mess inside and asked if Shinkawa had been robbed or attacked. Shinkawa responded that he was simply not good at cleaning. The coach commented that if Shinkawa had caused the mess himself, they had bigger problems than the match. Shinkawa shrugged off the comment, saying he would clean after returning from the match. As they prepared to leave, the coach stopped and asked again if Shinkawa was truly okay. Shinkawa, with a cold and distant stare, assured him that this situation was nothing new and that he was fine. Reluctantly accepting the answer, the coach followed Shinkawa outside, where Takashi picked them up in a car. During the drive, the coach told Shinkawa that he would not ask any more questions until after the match. He urged Shinkawa to speak to him once he had sorted out his thoughts, reminding him that his problems were the team's problems too. Shinkawa acknowledged the words with a brief confirmation, though the coach's worried gaze lingered as they traveled toward the upcoming fight. On the plane, Shinkawa and the coach prepared for their arrival. Shinkawa watched a video of Uyu's past matches, while the coach observed that the momentum of MMA was quite remarkable these days. Uyu was rated even higher than fighters who had already advanced to the UFC, and it was said that Uyu himself was close to joining the UFC as well. Shinkawa shared his observation that he could not find any particular weaknesses in Uyu's fights. The coach confirmed this analysis. The flight attendant instructed them to turn off their phones and the airplane took off. As the plane ascended, Shinkawa's recurring dream reappeared. In his mind, he sat alone, waiting at the entrance of the Colosseum, immense anxiety oozing out of him. The real cause of his anxiety became clear as the plane climbed higher. Shinkawa was terrified of flying. Shortly after takeoff, he passed out. After some time, Shinkawa regained consciousness. The coach explained that he had fainted as soon as the plane took off, and there was brief concern that they might have had to turn back. The coach had explained about Shinkawa's upcoming match, so the airline staff prepared a business-class seat for him. The coach advised him to visit a hospital once they arrived. Shinkawa theorized that it was just due to his recent weight cut. The coach, skeptical, suggested that Shinkawa might be lying out of fear that he would not be allowed to fight. Shinkawa affirmed that he was feeling good condition-wise. The coach reminded him of their gym's motto. Shinkawa recited it back, "Everyone becomes a cornerman for their teammates." The coach confirmed that they were one team and warned him not to forget it. He handed Shinkawa a pair of sunglasses he had brought, instructing him to wear them when they arrived at the lobby. Shinkawa, confused, asked why, but the coach told him to wait and see. At the airport, both Shinkawa and the coach wore their sunglasses. As they exited, they were immediately met with a barrage of camera flashes from reporters, justifying the coach's precaution. Amidst the crowd, they noticed a girl holding a sign for them. The coach approached her, thanked her for coming all the way, and introduced her as the CEO who was providing their accommodation. She had been a big fan of martial arts for a long time and had helped the coach back in the day. The girl welcomed them warmly after their long journey. They boarded a van and drove together. During the ride, she commented that it had been a long time since Shiraishi had been there. Shiraishi confirmed, feeling rather embarrassed, recalling how he had made a fuss after losing to Fixed Decision and vowed never to set foot there again. She reassured him that a fighter's life had its ups and downs and advised Shinkawa to ignore harsh comments as they were all mind games. Shinkawa joined the conversation, stating that he was not someone who worried about such things. Later, they arrived at a building where both Shinkawa and the coach stood by. Shinkawa stepped onto the scale, weighing himself in front of the reporters. They seemed a little too impressed by his muscles, and honestly it was kinda suspicious considering most of them were men. One reporter even blurted out that Shinkawa's muscles were so well defined. "Alright, we get it, buddy, no need to go full fan." Another reporter chimed in, saying his handsome face was almost overshadowed by them. "Really, his face is getting overshadowed. Sure, let's all just focus on his muscles." Totally not weird, all these guys, and that's the takeaway. Yeah, something's definitely off here. Just then, Uyu made his entrance, looking like he was about to walk a runway. He shrugged off his robe and stepped onto the scale like it was his personal stage. After both fighters passed the weigh-in without breaking a sweat, Uyu extended a hand for a handshake. Shinkawa, ever the professional, accepted, and they shared a firm handshake. At Big Thunder Arena, some time later, Shinkawa and his coach waited in the gym changing room. The coach asked about Shinkawa's condition, to which Shinkawa replied he was feeling perfect. The coach continued by warning him that if he got injured during this match, his UFC test match scheduled in 2 weeks would be cancelled. He strictly instructed Shinkawa to prioritize avoiding injury above all else, emphasizing that winning was secondary. An exciting match was good, but it was not the most important thing right now. Shinkawa confirmed his understanding. Reporter Tsuji approached and asked Shinkawa if he had a moment for an interview. She asked how he was feeling and if he could say a few words to his fans. Shinkawa replied that he was feeling good and promised to make it an exciting match for her. In the arena, the match began. Shinkawa entered wearing a robe that looked like it came straight from a Wish.com superhero costume collection. It wasn't quite cape-worthy, but it sure had something. The crowd chanted enthusiastically for him. Then Uyu made his entrance and the fans erupted into a frenzy, chanting his name with wild enthusiasm. He soaked it all in, flashing a confident grin as he waved to the crowd, clearly enjoying the attention. Shinkawa, standing quietly off to the side, watched silently, his expression unreadable. The two fighters locked eyes, their gaze intense and unwavering, as if daring each other to make the first move. The tension between them was palpable, the silent showdown speaking louder than any words could. Uyu's smirk barely flickered, while Shinkawa stood motionless, his eyes burning with quiet determination. Then, the announcer's voice cut through the silence, breaking the fierce stare-off. He began with the blue corner, introducing Shinkawa Kento as the youngest and fastest fighter to claim the FFC Lightweight Championship title. In the red corner, the announcer introduced Uyu Tenshin as the strongest and greatest fighter in history. He was the Big Thunder lightweight champion, having successfully defended his title a record 8 times, undefeated, and undisputed king of the ring. Yeah, the bias in the announcer's tone was definitely noticeable. The man was practically worshipping Uyu. The referee brought both fighters to the center. Uyu began his mind games, telling Shinkawa that he probably had never faced a proper opponent before and hoped he would not disappoint him, exuding a menacing presence before returning to his corner. Shinkawa replied that he too was expecting a lot from the fight. Reporter Tsuji commented that Uyu's aura was completely different from yesterday's weigh-in where he had appeared calm. Today, he resembled a beast. The referee signaled the start of round 1. Both fighters swiftly charged toward each other. Uyu threw the first punch, but Shinkawa guarded himself, raising his arms and not moving. Uyu quickly transitioned into a leg kick, but Shinkawa lifted his leg at the right moment, dodging it perfectly. Uyu immediately noticed that Shinkawa was completely different from the match footage he had seen before. Adjusting his tactics, Uyu launched another punch, but Shinkawa slightly shifted and dodged it with ease. Uyu was thrown into confusion upon realizing Shinkawa was fighting from a southpaw stance. Coach Shiraishi noticed that Shinkawa was using switch boxing, alternating between orthodox and southpaw stances during the match. Shiraishi thought that unless Shinkawa had highly practiced switch boxing, doing so would normally be suicide. Shinkawa continued fighting in the southpaw style, dominating Uyu with a relentless barrage of punches. Uyu was getting overwhelmed and cooked under Shinkawa's assault. Finally, Uyu retaliated with a punch, but Shinkawa ducked and dodged it effortlessly. Both the coach and reporter Tsuji were baffled, wondering when Shinkawa had learned perfect switch boxing. The coach then realized that Shinkawa must have picked up the southpaw stance while helping teach Jun, another southpaw fighter. Even so, he questioned whether it was even possible to learn it to such perfection so quickly. Meanwhile, in the ring, Shinkawa continued to destroy Uyu. Uyu contemplated how a simple switch hit could fool him so easily. Frustrated, he charged at Shinkawa with full force. However, Shinkawa stopped him cold with a powerful punch. Uyu refused to back down and immediately retaliated with a leg kick, but Shinkawa once again raised his leg at the perfect moment, dodging it with ease. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Uyu, the undefeated champion, was being tossed around. The fierce battle continued. Shinkawa pressed the offensive, pushing Uyu to his limits. In desperation, Uyu used his leg to pivot and launched a spinning back fist aimed at Shinkawa. Yet Shinkawa tackled Uyu, halting the attack and shoving him backward. Uyu, amazed by Shinkawa's strength, adapted quickly. He grappled for Shinkawa's hips, attempting to break the tackle. Uyu succeeded in separating himself from Shinkawa. Uyu threw a punch without hesitation, but Shinkawa was already prepared. With devastating force, Shinkawa landed a blow squarely on Uyu's face, brutally damaging him. And honestly, that looked like it hurts. Realizing the danger he was in, Uyu acknowledged that unless he stopped this relentless attack, he would be finished. Uyu tried to push Shinkawa away, but Shinkawa relentlessly pressed forward, striking Uyu again with another devastating punch to the face. Bruised and battered, Uyu somehow found the will to keep going. But with each blow, his face looked like it was having a very rough day. Shinkawa calmly parried each attack, deflecting Uyu's blows with precise movements, then counterattacking mercilessly, always aiming for Uyu's face. Because really, why not hit the same spot again, right? Under Shinkawa's endless pressure, Uyu found himself trapped. Shinkawa's fists never gave him a moment to breathe. Desperately, Uyu used his leg to push Shinkawa away once more, but Shinkawa grabbed hold of his leg mid-motion. From the sidelines, Coach Shiraishi and reporter Tsuji shouted in excitement, fully immersed in the chaos unfolding before them. Without hesitation, Shinkawa punched Uyu's face yet again. Seriously, at this point, Uyu might want to invest in some facial protection. He then released Uyu's leg and instantly shifted his stance, ready to attack once more. Uyu, however, retaliated by injuring Shinkawa's right eye. Blood streamed down from the wound, impairing Shinkawa's vision. Despite the injury, Shinkawa stood firm with an unyielding presence. Blood dripping from his eye, he charged at Uyu, throwing a barrage of punches without pause. Uyu, overwhelmed and terrified, wondered if Shinkawa was trying to kill him. Each punch came harder and faster, leaving no room for escape. Honestly, it was starting to feel like Uyu was just too familiar with the inside of a punching bag. When the flurry of blows finally paused, Uyu tried to reposition himself, but Shinkawa struck him once more in the face. Oh look, another punch to the face, what a surprise. Uyu's consciousness slipped away. Shinkawa remained standing beside the defeated Uyu, his expression dark and menacing. The referee quickly intervened, stopping the fight and declaring it over. Shinkawa glanced at his own hand, now soaked in blood. Slowly, he looked around the arena, his body trembling with pain and exhaustion. In that moment, as the weight of the battle sank into him, Shinkawa recognized the blood and pain for what they were, proof that he was alive. Lifting his gaze upward, Shinkawa allowed himself a faint, weary smile. The moment the fight ended, Shinkawa's coach and team rushed into the cage. Without hesitation, the coach scolded Shinkawa harshly, upset that he had sustained an injury. Shinkawa explained bluntly that this was precisely why he had finished the match quickly. After checking his condition carefully, the coach's anger subsided, and he praised Shinkawa for a job well done. In the opposite corner, Uyu sat quietly while being treated. His thoughts churned bitterly. He realized he had been genuinely afraid of Shinkawa during the fight. Even though he had worn a brave face to avoid being overwhelmed by the man's fighting spirit, deep down he knew he had been completely outmatched. Elsewhere, Jun watched the replay of the match with excitement. He celebrated with a loud cheer, catching the attention of a girl sitting next to him. The girl, clearly disturbed by the brutality of what she had just seen, commented that it was barbaric. Upon learning that Jun was actually learning this very sport, she looked at him with even greater disbelief. Jun, however, remained proud, declaring that the fighter she had just watched was his coach. Back at the arena, Uyu approached Shinkawa after the fight. He extended his hand, acknowledging Shinkawa's strength and offering his congratulations. Shinkawa accepted, and Uyu raised Shinkawa's hand high into the air to signal the rightful victor. The crowd erupted into cheers so loud it seemed to shake the entire arena. The announcer handed the microphone to Uyu to share his thoughts about the match. Uyu stated that he had poured everything he had into his training, but Shinkawa's overwhelming strength made it feel as though he had been fighting someone from another world entirely. Although the result had not been in his favor, he promised that he would come back stronger. He bowed his head deeply to the crowd, earning a wave of supportive applause. The scene shifted to the changing room. Shinkawa sat while being treated, his coach still fuming. The coach grumbled that the organizers were cheapskates for not even handing the microphone to the winner. According to the reporter, the event organizers were frustrated because they had spent so much money promoting the event, only for Shinkawa to win and upset their plans. The reporter noted that it was fortunate Shinkawa had secured a TKO victory in the first round. Judging by the atmosphere, if the fight had gone to decision, the judges might have leaned heavily in favor of the promoted fighter. She further praised Shinkawa's ability to study his opponent's habits and movements in detail and apply that analysis perfectly during the match. Shinkawa, ever modest, simply commented that he had done what his coach instructed him to do. In the days that followed, the internet exploded with speculation, admiration, and wild theories. Is it true he easily defeated Uyu? When Shinkawa won, it was so thrilling. Was Uyu even that strong to begin with? No way, Uyu is the strongest, Shinkawa's just on another level. MMA fans have been unusually quiet since the match, lol. I think Shinkawa could handle ranked UFC fighters. Even I, with zero knowledge of combat sports, know about Shinkawa now. I became a fan of Shinkawa after this match. His face, body, and fighting style are all perfect. Total dream. Watching Shinkawa reminds me of Shiraishi Kan in his prime. Who would win between prime Shiraishi Kan and current Shinkawa? While the online world buzzed, Shinkawa was already back in the gym, training hard despite his injuries. A short promotional video was being filmed by the reporter, capturing his relentless dedication. His coach, concerned for his recovery, advised him to manage his injuries and take care with his stitches. During training, Uyu arrived at the gym. He greeted Shinkawa and his coach respectfully and presented a replica of the Big Thunder Championship belt as a congratulatory gift to Shinkawa. The coach accepted the belt with appreciation. Uyu then conveyed an invitation from Big Thunder's organization, offering Shinkawa a place among their ranks. The coach, surprised, pointed out that if Shinkawa joined, it would mean Uyu would have to give up his champion title. Uyu, humble despite everything, admitted that although he believed no fighter in Big Thunder currently surpassed his skill, if Shinkawa joined, he would naturally step down. The coach remarked that Big Thunder's organization must be truly ruthless to send such a heavy message through their current champion. He clarified that he had chosen to deliver the message personally. After fighting Shinkawa firsthand, he understood the difference clearly. In his weight class, there were no opponents strong enough for either of them anymore. Uyu confessed that during the match, Shinkawa's punches were so fierce that he felt actual relief when the fight ended. He continued by stating that Mr. Shiraishi, Shinkawa's coach, was a former UFC-ranked fighter. The pride that radiated from Coach Shiraishi after hearing this was impossible to miss. Shinkawa, watching his coach bask in glory, could only feel a sense of bewilderment at seeing him in such a light. Uyu went on to explain that although he could not express it during the match, he held deep respect for Shiraishi. After their fight, Uyu realized the true importance of facing stronger opponents to improve. He lamented that many fighters in Asia stagnated because they stayed in smaller leagues without challenging themselves globally. When Shinkawa asked if that was why he had come in person, Uyu confirmed it. He expressed that he wished to be more than just a champion of an organization. He wanted to become a true champion, aiming for the pinnacle of combat sports in UFC. If Shinkawa joined Big Thunder, they could become rivals and comrades, pushing each other to new heights. Shinkawa responded firmly, stating that he could not stop moving forward. The meaning behind his words was clear. He would not be tied down. Uyu, understanding and respectful, accepted this. At the very least, he insisted Shinkawa accept the gift. They shook hands with a mutual understanding and respect between them, wishing each other success on their respective paths. At that moment, a woman appeared, commenting loudly about how beautiful the scene was. Both fighters turned, their faces marked with the same expression, confusion over who this new, overly familiar stranger could possibly be.